Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Latoro Yates. I am the Vice President for Student Development and Enrollment Management. And I want to say thank you for attending Hostos Community College Black History event sponsored by the student of SDEM. We are super excited. We have Kay Bell with us. I invited her to come home. For many of you may know that she worked at Hostos for a time in the SSCU unit. I see some of her folks in the invite list, so we're very happy to have everyone here. So let me first just start off by saying welcoming everyone on behalf of President Coco de Felipes. She was very excited when I told her about Kay Bell being a Bronx Poet Laureate. She loves history. She loves poetry. As everyone knows, she loves literature. And she may join us a little bit later, but there are multiple events that are happening on campus, and she wanted to make sure that she could visit the different offerings. So before we get started, I would like to ask Rocio to please read Kay Bell's bio. Thank you.
Kay Bell is an educator, a storyteller, and music enthusiast. She is the current Bronx Poet Laureate and will serve in this position until 2025. For her, writing works as a birthing floor for healing, invention, and reimagination, where the poetic voice is responsible for both blessing and bruising the inquiring reader. When she isn't advising and teaching her students at the College of New York, the City College of New York, she can be found nurturing her plants and her two sons in the heart of the South Bronx.
So I now have the pleasure to introduce Miss Kay Bell. Everyone in the chat, just kind of raise your hand, give some snaps, some celebration. But Kay, welcome back home to Hostos Community College. The floor is yours.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for this warm welcome. It's really great to be back. It's an honor to be back here presenting for this webinar, not because I love every opportunity that I have to talk about poetry, but also I love the opportunity to give a platform to Black women writers and poets who have inspired me along my journey. And so it's my homage to these women today who raised me in poetic form as an educator, as a mom, as a community advocate, and the list goes on. But today is my homage to them. So today we're going to talk about Black women poets and their contribution to the literary world. And so my objective here today is to emphasize that although Black women have been historically marginalized and overlooked in the literary world and beyond, right, in society in general, Black women poets have consistently used their work, their poetry, to educate, to advocate, and to challenge systems of oppression, which have served for our communities for us to be more empowered, inspired, and to ultimately heal. And so in my work as the Bronx Poet Laureate, my work revolves around healing using poetry. And so I aim to demonstrate how we can use creative forms such as poetry as our healing journey. So I really, really am passionate about the work that Black women poets do. And I also fit into that category. So I also think that it's important to give these women their flowers, right? We know that they've been overlooked and historically marginalized, and they don't always get the acknowledgement they deserve. So I'm really grateful for this platform today to be able to acknowledge all of these Black women writers that we're going to talk about today and their work for social justice and activism in our communities. So to get started, before we move any further, I want you to think about the term heroine. I want you to think about what comes to mind. How might that definition shift or expand when you consider the experiences and the stories of Black women? So I'll give you about 60 seconds, not minutes, 60 seconds to reflect on the word heroine. And how might that definition shift or expand when we consider the experiences and the stories of Black women? And you can put your answers into the chat. Um, I will tell you why I call these women heroines. And so the reason I refer to them as heroines is because a heroine is someone who's courageous and depicts strength and resilience and nobility in times of adversity, right? They also inspire others to overcome their own obstacles. And so I really think that it's fitting that the women we discuss today are referred to as poetic heroines because they're women who write not only in their own sense of power and personal freedom, but their work liberates us too. Okay. And so specifically, when we define a woman heroine, we think of a woman poet of African or diasporic descent who has made significant contribution to the world of poetry by first exploring and expressing unique experiences, right? So we know that intersectionality says that people from marginalized communities experience the overlapping overlapping identities of oppression, right? So whether it's oppression, whether it's race, class, gender, sexuality, intersectionality refers to the unique experiences of oppression for those within marginalized communities. And particularly for Black women, we not only face racism and discrimination because of our race, but we also experience prejudice and bias because of our gender and any other identities that we fall into. Black women heroines also challenge stereotypes, and so they provide a platform for marginalized voices, and they use counter narratives, right? So they go against those dominant narratives, right? The white male domination narratives that we usually hear in our society. They're also celebrated for their ability to use language and poetic form to convey powerful messages. And they also broaden the representation of diverse voices within the art form. So they challenge those white male domination in written works. So it's important to note that Black women, it's important to note that many artistic and cultural movements have been greatly impacted by Black women writers, whether novelists, poets, playwrights. Black women have always been involved with the development and preserving of Black culture. So think about the Harlem Renaissance and the Black arts movements. So the Harlem Renaissance took place between the 1920s and the 1930s and was a period where cultural, intellectual, and artistic revival for African Americans was booming, right? It was centered on a sense of pride and self-expression, and it was a move away from celebrating white culture and towards celebrating Black culture. So women such as Nella Narson, Zora Neale Hurston, and Dorothy West, they were a huge part of establishing Black identity during this time. So these were all Black women during this time that were facing racial barriers. They were also writing about the influence of slavery and the impact that it had on them during that time. And they were creating new Black identity, right? And they were fostering community and highlighting the everyday experiences of Black people. So specifically with Zora Neale Hurston, she was named the queen of the Harlem Renaissance. And that was because she was really passionate about using dialect in her work, right? And her unorthodox research methods made people see her work as truly authentic. So recently I watched a PBS a biography of Zora Neale Hurston, and she was so passionate about her research that she often wrote about voodoo. And she went to Haiti and she participated in voodoo rituals so that she can get a real genuine sense of how these rituals happened or took place. And so that's why they called her the queen of the Harlem Renaissance. She was really passionate about not just writing, but immersing herself into the experience so that her writing would be more authentic and genuine for her audiences. And the Black arts movement, this happened, also known as BAM. It occurred between the 1960s and the 1970s, and it was a art movement that created new cultural institutions, and it conveyed a very strong message of Black pride. So some Black women writers that were involved with BAM were spoken artist poet Jane Cortez, educator and poet Sonia Sanchez, and poet and activist June Jordan, just to name a few. And these women, they use dance and music and poetry to speak about Black issues but to also celebrate the beauty of Black women and their communities. And so these forms of art was not only about promoting self-expression, but they were tied to community building and fostering a sense of solidarity. We also have some Black heroines in poetry in CUNY. Audre Lorde, she not only she not only graduated from Hunter College, but she taught at Lehman and at John Jay, and eventually she taught at Hunter College as well. She focused much of her work on sexism, feminism, classism, and homophobia. Her poem, A Litany for Survival, is one of her most famous works, is one of my favorite. And it's a call of action, urging readers to recognize and resist oppression. A line from her poem that I love is, "But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it's better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive." And so, I mean, very powerful as she denounces silence, as many of us, including myself, grew up in a household where silence was big, right? We know a lot of our ancestors didn't like to talk about the painful experiences, but Audre Lorde was one of those heroines who said, no, we can't be silent. We have to speak up and become advocates for Black oppression and injustice. And in that speaking up, we're freed, right? We can make things happen and we can see things change. Bell Hooks was also an educator in CUNY. She's a poet and theorist, and her work focused greatly on feminism and class, but also topics such as race, oppression, sexuality, and love. I just finished reading her book, All About Love, and I love how she describes love as when you love someone, you nurture them spiritually, right? You want to see the core of their being nourished and well. And I thought that was brilliant. She also, although she taught at Yale and Stanford University, she was also a distinguished professor at both the City College of New York. So if I feel like I'm walking right in her footsteps, and the Graduate Center. Does anyone know why Bell Hooks spells her name with all lowercase letters? Okay, so I'll tell you. No, so somebody said no. So she spells her names with lowercase letters to emphasize a focus on her message rather than herself. So I think that that's such a meekness. She doesn't want people to focus on the messenger, but more of the message. So now we're going to talk about some pioneers in Black for Black heroines in poetry. So these are Black female poets who set the stage for other Black women in poetry. They're among the first Black women who were recognized for being a Black woman poet, and their contribution to the development of poetry have been significantly important to the development of the art form. So the first person is Lucy Terry Prince. So most people think that Phyllis Whitley is the first Black woman writer and poet, but it was actually Louis Terry Prince. So she was born around 1730. We're really not sure. No one's exactly sure of her exact birth date because she was stolen from Africa as an infant and brought to America, Rhode Island. And so she lived between 1730 and 1821, approximately. And she was the author of the first poem composed by an African-American woman. She gained recognition as a storyteller and orator while educating her 6 kids. And she was also an activist. She fought for her oldest son to be admitted into college. So we know during that time, Black people were not allowed to go to college, but she had the spirit and the advocacy in her blood that she fought to get her oldest son to be admitted into college. She did not win. She was not successful. But just the spirit and the determination and to know that that's what she deserved and that's what her son deserved says a lot about her. She was also the first woman who argued a case in Supreme Court. And again, she wasn't successful. It was over land. But again, just that spirit of fight in her and the spirit to overcome oppression was very much in her blood. And her poem, Bars Fight, is the oldest known work of literature by an African American, though it was published long after her death. So many of Lucy Terry Prince's stories and poems were told by word of mouth, which we know that that's how our ancestors told most of our stories. But Bars Fight was eventually published 100 years after she died. And this is a line from the poem. August was the 25th, 1746. The Indians did in ambush lay, some very valiant men to slay. The names of whom I will not leave out. Samuel Allen like a hero fought. And though he was so brave and bold, his face no more shall we behold. Edgar Hawks was killed outright before he had time to fight. Before he did, the Indian Sea was shot and killed immediately. And so we see that the poet reflects on their emotions and what's happening in their community and how, the violence of it, right? And it shows that she cared about the community. This is about a particular fight that happened at a bar that she witnessed. And she was really compelled to write about it because she felt connected to the pain and to what was going on in the community. So Phyllis Whitley, which is a more common name that many of us probably know, she was also stolen from Africa, which many of us know, and brought to America. She was brought to Boston, Massachusetts at a very young age. And she was bought by the Whitley family, whose wife saw the potential in her from very young and allowed her to read and write. Something that I forgot to mention about Lucy Terry was that she was brought to the Wells family, and the same kind of experience where the Wells wife was also very infatuated with her and wanted her to read and write. So we see like a common theme between both of them. But Phyllis Whitley used her speaking and writing skills to speak out against slavery, and her poems explore themes of liberty, oppression, and humanity. So she worked towards humanizing the enslaved in her work. And as a poet and skilled speaker, Whitley challenged the idea that the enslaved was inferior, right? So her work was so admired that it caught wind by George Washington, who responded to one of her poems with a letter inviting him to his headquarters, where he expressed how he saw her work as a way to promote a unified America. So we see Black women already taking strides towards change in how our society functions, right? And working towards changing the societal norms of that day. And here's a poem. Here's some lines from Phyllis Wheatley's poem on tyranny and slavery, 1772. Should you, my lord, while you pursue my song, wonder from whence my love of freedom sprung, whence flow these wishes for the common good, by feeling hearts alone best understood. I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Africa's fancy happy seat. What pangs excruciating must molest, with sorrows labor in my parents' breasts. So, I mean, we feel the pain, right? And we feel the emotion that she writes here. And so it makes sense how she was part of the abolitionist movement and working towards changing things when it comes to the enslaved and that system. So we also have the revolutionaries, right? And these are the Black female poets who unapologetically challenge oppression, demanded justice, and encouraged collective action against systemic oppression and discrimination. And so this first poet, I mean, this is like, I feel like this is my mother poet. Like she nurtured me. When I first started writing, I found a Nikki Giovanni book in the library, and I went out to Barnes and Nobles and I found every book that I could find on her to read, because what happened when I read Nikki Giovanni was a sense of empowerment. I had never heard a Black woman be so proud to be Black and to celebrate herself. And for me, that gave me a personal sense of empowerment. So Nikki Giovanni, born 1943, and she's still present to today, used poetry as part of her activism largely in the 1960s and 70s. She was influenced by the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, and the themes of her work are strong, militant, African American perspective. She's also the first recipient of the Rosa Parks Women of Courage Award, so it's very fitting that she would be considered a Black heroine in poetry. And during the 60s and 70s, she was an active member of the Black arts movement, which again was an African American-led art movement that created new cultural institutions and conveyed a message of Black pride through activism and art. And I also think one more thing about Nikki Giovanni, I think that she also challenged me as a writer, and just as a Black woman who has the responsibility to use my art to empower others. So she was really a big inspiration in where I am today. And here's her poem, Revolutionary Dreams.
Poetry is a living entity, which means it must expand its wings, it must fly. I used to dream militant dreams of taking over America to show these white folks how it should be done. I used to dream radical dreams of blowing everyone away with my perceptive powers of correct analysis. I even used to think I'd be the one to stop the riot and negotiate the peace. Then I awoke and dug that if I dreamed natural dreams of being a natural woman, doing what a woman does when she is natural, I would have a revolution.
And so we hear the power and the force and the love and the empowerment in Nikki Giovanni's work. Another poet that I really consider a revolutionary poet is Ntozake Shange. And I actually had a chance of watching her win the Langston Hughes Medal of Honor at City College. They have the event every year. They give the award to a Black writer, man or woman, a Black writer or literary professional who has shown great contributions in Black literature. And so Ntozake Shange won, I believe, in 2016. And I had the honor of watching her receive the award. So that was really special for me. So she's considered as a Black feminist. She addressed issues relating to race and Black power in much of her work. She wrote the play for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. That play also turned into a movie with Janet Jackson, Thandie Newton, and a lot of other big women celebrities. And from 1972 until 1975, Shange used dance, poetry in her work as an educator and in the humanities and women's studies. Here's here's one of my favorite pieces. This is actually from For Colored Girls, When the Rainbow Isn't Enough. And it reads, somebody, anybody, sing a Black girl song, bring her out to know herself, to know you, but sing her rhythms, caring, struggle, hard times. Sing her song of life. She's been dead so long, closed in silence so long. She doesn't know the sound of her own voice, her infinite beauty. She's half notes scattered without rhythm. No tune, sing her side, sing the song of her possibilities, sing a righteous gospel. Let her be born and handled warmly. Another thing about Ntozake Shange that I love, and you can see it in this poem, is that she plays around with the form, right? She uses the slashes and she plays around with space. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about the Trailblazers. And so these next two poets are female Bronx poets. And these are Black women poets who have been recognized for breaking new ground, setting trends, and pioneering innovative approaches to the craft of poetry. So they challenge not only traditional forms, themes, and styles, but they also push the boundaries by experimenting with new techniques, language, and form. And so the first poet is Roya Marsh. And so for anyone that does not know this, Roya Marsh is one of the co-founders of the Bronx Poet Laureate initiative. So she's the one that said, hey, They have a laureate in Brooklyn, they have one in Queens, and they have one in many other states. We need one here. There's a lot of artistic and cultural value right here in the Bronx. And so Roya Marsh and Cericia Fennell were the founders of the Bronx Poet Laureate. And so Roya, her poetry collection, Daylight, is a protest against the lack of representation, and it's also a rebuke of broken notions of sexuality and race. She also plays a lot around with form and structure. She uses space, she uses music. She's also a slam poet. Does everyone know what slam poetry is? For those of you who don't, it's spoken word, which incorporates the hip hop and rap and storytelling. I got a chance to see Roya Marsh at the Nuyorican Cafe over the summer, and she is an amazing entertainer. You can tell she grew up on hip hop. Is very prevalent in her work. And what is really special about slam poetry is that it asks the audience to participate in a call and response type of way, right? And it also focuses on social and political issues, which is much of what Roya Marsh's work focuses on. Her poems play with form and language in a way that infuses hip hop and her roots in slam. And we're going to listen to one of her poems in a second, but other Bronx women poets are Peggy Alvarez Robles, Imani Wallace, Lyrical Faith, and Heidu Henriquez. Heidu is actually the inaugural Bronx Poet Laureate.
I might blow, but we gonna be all right. My name is Roya Marsh, and I am a Black poet who would not remain silent while this nation continues to murder Black people. I have a right to be angry. I have a right to be joyful. And Black joy is real. It's native. It's not white. Was here before that. Before God said, let there be light so they could witness a glimpse of what they've been missing. Black. It's not a color, but absorbs all the colors of the visible spectrum and reflects none. Joy is a feeling of great pleasure or happiness. Black joy looks like me, like him, or her, or them. It knows no gender, just knows prosperity in spite of white supremacy. Black joy is a stone, worthy of digging, of excavating, a coveted jewel, to be held up to light, to sparkle, to dazzle. Black joy knows this poem is necessary, no matter what those judges say, because they can't tell me Black joy won't break any scale they put it on. Shit, they can't tell me Black joy ain't the scale itself. Black joy is contagious. So contagious, folks got caught appropriating, caught pinning Black against Black, or Joy against Joy, or Remy against Nikki, or Cardi against Nikki, or Ree against B, because healthy, wealthy Black femmes just got too close to God, and they only want to see us Black and joyous if they made us that way. But they cannot create Black joy the same way they created race. They cannot dictate our Blackness. They cannot dictate our happiness. And yeah, it's true. Once you go Black joy, you never go back. Ask the Kardashians, those black holes. Make a statement. Make a staple of Black joy. See, Black and happy can be synonymous. So whenever you hear the word Black, instead hear happy. Case in point. In 2016, we bid farewell to this nation's first happy president. February will now and forever be known as Happy History Month. Hollywood still won't cast happy people to play our happy selves, and yet another happy body is found slain. All the more reason to preserve this shield, this force field of fortune. No hot commodity to be bought or bootlegged or Kylie lip kit, backshot, brainwashed. Be your happiest when your mouth is open. Be your blackest when your mouth is open. Shout it at right about now. Shout Black, shout joy. Remember, white supremacy is a beast that feeds on attention. Will be happier, be hungrier, starve that shit. Leave it nothing but the bones. Yo, Houston, thank you so much.
And so we understand, we get if you've never heard slam poetry, that is the best example that you can have of slam poetry. Every time I go to a slam, and I'm not a slam poet, but I love to listen to it, it's like there's some type of magic that happens. I feel like a fire in my soul when I leave a slam. And that is the innovative and non-traditional but like it just shows the creativity of what we can and the possibilities of what we can do with poetry. So yeah, if you've never been to a slam, I encourage you to go to one. The Nuyorican, they have them all the time. And although the original location of the Nuyorican on the lower west side of Manhattan is closed, I think that they meet now in different places and they have the slams in different places. So you can look that up online. And so the last poet that represents the Trailblazers is Kimon Felix. She's a Bronx poet. She was born and raised here in the Bronx, and she was the first Black woman and youngest to serve as Andrew Cuomo's speechwriter. Her poetry challenges traditional norms and tackles subjects such as abortion, sexuality, gender, race, and sexual assault. So all the topics that are taboo, right? That we don't like to talk about. And I think that's what's really special about Black women poets, Black heroines, right? We often talk about the things that no one else wants to talk about, that's uncomfortable, but we kind of like put it in your face and here it is. And she was also one of the 3 judges for the inaugural Bronx Poet of the Bronx. So she was one of the judges that crowned Hadel Henriquez as Bronx Poet Laureate. And here's one of her poems. I can't tell you why I loved him or what it meant. When you were a child, you know only the kind of love your little life lacked. So every blooming flower is a field. And so what I really love about this poem is that you got to read it more than one time because there's so much in this little piece. And I actually would just finish reading her book of poems over the summer. And all of her poems are like this. They say so much with so little. And I think that's the beauty of poetry. Not only can we do so much with it, but we can give messages to the world, right? We can connect with each other. I love that. I love the collaboration in poetry. When I read this, I may get something different from when you read it. And so I think that is really beautiful about poetry, that it has many different meanings. So take whatever you want from this. I got my gems from it, and you take yours. So I'm going to close out with a few words by Auntie Sonia Sanchez, and I call her Auntie because she is something that she said that always stuck with me was that we don't redefine ourselves, but we just reimagine ourselves. We just keep reimagining ourselves in different forms as we grow. And she is one of those Black heroines in poetry that helped me reimagine myself. And this poem, Queens of the Universe, talks about Black beauty and Black strength and Black resilience and celebrating Black women. And I think that is really fitting to end the presentation on this.
In 2 parts. The first part will be talking about Black women in the struggle, and it's called Queens of the Universe, because Black women be queens. If they could just see their beauty, you see. We Black women have been called many things: foxes, matriarchs, sapphires, sisters, and recently queens. I would say that Black women have been a combination of all them words, because if we examine our past history at one time or another, we've had to be like them words be saying. But today, there are some roads we can discard. There be some we must discard for our own survival, for our own sanity, for the contributions we must make to our emerging Black nation. And we must move to as the only queens of this universe to sustain, keep our sanity in this insane, messed up, die-conscious, pill-taking, masochistic, misorientated society got to be dealt with. Because that's us. You all hear me? Us. Black women, the only queens of this universe. Even though we be stepping unqueenly sometimes, like it ain't easy being a queen in this unrighteous world full of Miss Anns and Mr. Anns. But we steady trying.
But we steady trying. And all the more so, I think that these women did more than try, right? And I hope as a Black woman poet that I'm doing more than trying. So I have a challenge for you guys as I end the presentation. For this month of February, for Black History Month, make it your business to read one book of poetry written by a Black woman poet. Thank you.
That was amazing, an amazing presentation. So I just want to say thank you. But before we let you go, I do want to ask if there are any questions from the attendees.
I'm willing to recite a short poem. Sure. So I'm actually in the middle of writing a poetic memoir, and let me pull it up. And so one of my favorite poems, and I think this is not my favorite poem because I like talking about my mom in this way, but again, when we go back to poetry and healing, my poetry it has been one of those things that I've used along my journey to heal me. And so this poem is from my upcoming poetic memoir, and it's called Girl. And it begins with an epithet. My mother's favorite story, a dull one of course, is that she did not scream during birth. Hugh, men, win. Once I found out my mother nearly drowned herself while pregnant with me, I understood my depression. There's something about the guilt of being born when the day will not have you that shoves you towards the center of silence until you cannot scream or reach. They say if the mother hates the baby as it grows inside the belly, it's a girl. They say if the girl hates the mother as it grows inside the belly, it's diabolical. And because I was such a quiet child, my mother often could not find me. I would close my eyes and hide in the corners of my room. And when my mother peeked into the tiny spaces, she would ask, "What are you doing?" And I would ball myself up tighter, and almost in a whisper, I'd answer, "I'm trying to drown." So that's for my upcoming memoir, Where the Sun Splits Open.
Wow. Rocio, do we have at least one question?
We do. What poets or writers inspired you to start writing?
So as I said during the presentation, Nikki Giovanni, hands down, she mothered me. Whatever mothering I didn't get from home definitely came from her work. So I definitely would have to say her. Also, I love Warshan Shire. She's one of those that every time I read her work, it pierces something deeply. Some of you probably know her work from Lemonade. Beyonce used her poems in her Lemonade video. So she's another one. And I also love poets like W.S. Mervyn, Charles Simic, some of the classics too.
Thank you. What inspires you to begin a poem?
I think that's a good question. So my first book is called Cry, Sweat, Bleed, Write. And the reason why I titled it that was because when people would ask me that question, I would say, whatever makes me cry, sweat, or bleed, I'm going to write about it. So, I mean, I can think of being at Dunkin' Donuts and seeing two teenagers in a conversation and wanting to write about that. I can, my own painful experiences, my own happy experiences. So I mean, inspiration is all around us. We just have to take the time to breathe it in, accept it.
And to follow up with that, so when you've been inspired and you've taken that breath, what is your first step to start writing?
So it's always words. So my mom likes to tell people how I used to read the dictionary when I was younger, and this is true. I was a nerd. I probably still am. But it's always words. So like the words they're like a puzzle to me. So I might start thinking about 2 or 3 words and play around with it in my head for a couple of days, sometimes for a couple of weeks. And then the poem will start taking shape from there. Do I have any upcoming poetry writing? Yeah, so I just finished one. It was a 3-part series at the Dream Yard Art Center on poetry and healing. And so I should have another poetry workshop that focus on poetry and healing coming up sometime maybe during April. You can check my website, imkbell.com, for the dates for that.
What has been the most invaluable experience as a poet representing the South Bronx?
So I think you mean valuable, right? What has been the most valuable experience? I think like connecting, every time I connect with people, I realize that many people have you know, loved writing from young, right? But maybe they didn't get into the careers, or they didn't continue to pursue it because they didn't have someone to encourage them. Or as an academic advisor, a lot of students don't want to become English creative writing majors because they don't see the possibilities in it. And so I think that one of the most valuable experiences for me is to show people the possibilities. Right. I'm a writer, I'm an educator, you know, I teach English. And so all of those things kind of like fold into each other. And yeah, and you can make a career out of it. I think people always think that you know, writing, you have to, you know, write full time. There's so many other things you can do with writing. There's a lot of freedom in it.
You also have some shout outs about your amazing glasses and frames. I just want to share with everyone if you want to put also where you got them for me. Um, um, and also, do you experience writer's block? And if so, how do you overcome it?
Yeah, I do. I'm just, let me tell you, I'm just coming off of about a 6-month period of writer's block. 6 months. And that's probably the longest I think I've come. I just, and when that happens, I need to be around people and things that really inspire me. And so recently I joined a writing group, Sunday's Writing Club. And so with some other amazing poets and educators. I mean, there's memoirists, essayists, poets, novelists, all type of writers in the writing group. And so I really feel inspired. I'm also inspired by pain, sadly to say. I mean, you know, that's the vehicle. And so yeah, I recently went through something really difficult, and so that kind of like pushed me back out into writing too.
What do you have to say to folks who say, I like to write, but I'm not a writer?
Oh, I hear that all the time. Or even the people who say, I write poetry, but I'm not really a poet. Yeah, you are. You know, I did not start calling myself a poet until I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And that was the biggest mistake I think I made. I have been writing for so long, and not a degree or anyone's external validation made me a writer, but I'm a writer because that's my innate, like that is my innate part of my personality of who I am, right? And so yeah, I would say don't say that. If you love to write, that is why we have poets in STEM right now. We have some great poets that are working in the wrong fields because they're saying that they're not poets or they're not writers. It's not true. If you love to write and it's something that you're passionate about, then I mean, go for it. I know that sounds so cliche, but literally, I never thought I would be the Bronx Poet Laureate. That was not something I ever mapped out for myself. I wrote because I needed it, right? I needed to heal. And, you know, over the years, I didn't even realize that that was happening, but that writing did that for me. So whatever it is that inspires you to write or pushes you to write, I would absolutely encourage it. Absolutely.
Someone asked why, can you share why you use K Bell instead of
Carrie Ann.
another? I'm
Um, so a little transparency here. So when I really started getting serious about my writing, I kind of wanted to leave Carrie Ann behind, right? But it's so funny because recently I just bought this name necklace for myself this Christmas, and it says Carrie Ann. And I think that I was probably ashamed of certain things when I grew up, or I wanted to move away from certain things. And so I wanted this new identity. But what I think is really important is that Carrie Ann she's always here. Something that I learned in therapy is like use your name when you're speaking to your inner child, right? And so when I'm speaking to my inner child, I don't say hi, Kay. I say Carrie Ann. So yeah, I did it for, you know, whatever reasons then, but I'm still very much Carrie Ann.
And we'll take one more question. How do you feel when you find out you had a positive impact on other communities, nationalities, etc.? And do you write for one group and realize later that the message is universal?
Okay, so the first part of the question is when I find out that I had a positive impact, it lets me know that I should still keep going. And I have like my little invisible wallet where I save those little stories for the days where I feel like I'm tired or I don't want to do this no more or whatever, that my work is important. And I don't do it just for myself, but I do it for others. And so it inspires me to know that they're inspired, and it keeps me going. And do I write for one group and realize later that the message is universal? I mean, yeah, I write about love, I write about pain. All of those things are universal, right? I write in frustration. So, I mean, emotions are universal. But I also think that it's important for me as a Black woman to write about my unique experiences, because the literary world is very limited to, you know, perspectives. And we see that changing more and more now, but it's important for me to write about my experiences as a Black woman to empower other women. I feel like that's my responsibility.
Awesome. So as we close out, Kay, I just want you to know that President Coco T. Felipe said you are welcome to come back anytime that you would like to come back, and we're going to make sure we have you again and again and again, because we want to give you your flowers in real time. I want to thank everyone, and please, everyone, have a great day.